Hey, Vikings fans, welcome into another episode of the Skol Hop. I'm Evan.
And I'm Austin.
We're just a couple of dudes from Iowa. We like drinking beer, talking about the Vikings.
Absolutely we do. And we got a good beer this week. I'm excited.
It's a mystery, again.
I say that. I've never tried this beer, but we've tried the brewery and the beer looks good, so I'm excited to try it.
You know what else looks good is your foil wrapping job.
You know, you get enough grief for something and you gotta change it.
This is next level.
Pay no mind to the transparent tape on the seam.
I did notice that, but if it's what keeps it together, then there you go.
That's true. But I will say I tried the hardest on this foil wrap job, harder than I ever have before. So
nicely done.
Yep.
Well, we'll get into that in just a minute. But before we do, we better thank our friends over at Big Top Ventures for sponsoring today's episode. So, quick shout out to them. Quick shout out to Big Top Ventures for sponsoring today's episode. They can get you the lowest rate possible on several all-inclusive resorts in Mexico or Jamaica. Big Top Ventures, step right up to your next big adventure, and you can email them at bigtopventures@LLC. I almost forgot that part. bigtopventuresllc@gmail.com. So that'll be down here on the screen. And shoot them an email if you're interested in checking them out.
And please do. Just over a week since I've been down there. And I want to go back to Cancun today. That'd be awesome if I could get a flight right now. And if I could, I know Big Top Ventures would be able to hook me up. But yeah, it's a good time. And I'll definitely be booking through them again. Hopefully
and I'm
sometime soon.
Definitely hoping to in the future. So
your wife would appreciate it. All
right, let's get into this beer.
Yeah.
So another week of some tall boys here.
Yeah. You know, you kind of can't go away from tall boys once you start getting on that train. So
true.
So I found this one at our favorite spot, and I really wanted to try it. I have never tried it. I would venture to say that you've never had this one either.
Okay.
But yeah, I think it's still guessable. You should be able to get the type of beer, the alcohol content, and with some help, you'll be able to get the brewery.
All right.
So
let's do this.
Let's crack them open.
Always a good chance to remind our audience out there that if you're listening, you might want to watch on YouTube or Spotify. You can watch us pour the beer each week. Get a sense of what we're drinking.
You can even find some clips on Facebook from time and again.
Yeah.
And we are not hard to find. The Skol Hop everywhere. So what are you thinking, Ev? What are you seeing on this beer? What are you smelling? What are your thoughts?
So my first thought, and you said it's one that we haven't had, so this would be wrong, but it looks and smells like Big Grove Arms Race.
Okay. I see what you mean. That is an amber look, a darker look beer. And this one is also a darker beer. Mm-hmm. It's not, you can't really see through this. This is a thick looking, very hazy looking beer. Using my words carefully here. Have you tried it yet? Did you just take a sip or are you waiting?
I'm waiting for the Skol.
Let's try it. Skol.
Skol. Wow.
Ooh. Okay.
That's interesting.
That is interesting. It's got like a hit of a flavor that I did not expect. You don't normally get that kind of, I'll almost say like caramely type flavor that just comes through at the end. Is that right? Am I kind of hitting it there?
There's some sweetness in there, but there's also some hoppy bitterness to it as well. It's balanced, I think, in a lot of ways. I like it.
This may be the thickest looking non-porter beer I've ever seen.
So it's not a porter. Okay.
You got me.
Process of elimination.
Yeah, again, I need to choose my words carefully.
Okay. Gosh.
Yeah. So listeners, while he's thinking, I'll describe it a little bit more. It's pretty thick looking. It has, would you say like a caramel look to it?
It does.
The color and
it's very
viscosity.
Brown.
Yeah. It's got a nice, I don't know, earthy, IPA-y, hoppy flavor.
It's definitely got a strong hop character to it. But then, it finishes nice and sweet on the back end.
Yeah, that's...
Is it caramel or caramel?
That's kind of the flavor I'm getting. Nothing in the name of this says caramel or anything like that.
I was more concerned about the pronunciation of the word.
Yeah, it's a personal choice, but if you say anything other than caramel, you're wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, I had to think about what I say there for a second.
I think I've said it both ways. It's like
probably.
Data.
Yeah.
I've said both the same, or in.
Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
All right. This is tough, actually. You said this would be easy, but
I think you'd be able to guess it. So just take it one step at a time. Type. What do you think about type?
I think I'm going to go with it like a hoppy amber.
Oh, okay. So you're saying hoppy amber.
Yeah.
Official guess?
Going.
Yeah. Going.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you're wrong on that.
Okay.
It's a double dry hopped hazy IPA.
Okay. Well, that would make sense because, it's very hazy, first of all. And yeah, that hop character is strong. Mm-hmm. But it's not the typical color that it's not as light.
No, just off the color, I can see why you guessed amber. And it's got that almost darker flavor. Mm-hmm. So I can also, off the flavor, kind of see why you would think that.
That's why it reminded me of Arms Race, because that has that hoppy IPA flavor to it, but it also has the maltiness of an amber beer. So, okay, so it's a double dry hopped hazy IPA. Mm-hmm. I'm going to guess the ABV is, let's go 6.3%.
Oh. Now I'm second guessing myself a little bit.
I had to peel the foil back last week to check.
I'm gonna say you're definitely wrong. You're undershooting it a lot.
I'm undershooting.
Yeah, but I wanna
I
wanna figure out if I can. Oh man.
I'm not looking. I'm looking at the camera.
All right. I know it's on the can.
You picked the wrong spot to look.
I did. My goodness.
Is it 7, 8? It definitely tastes boozy.
You are wrong. It is 8.5.
Woo!
Yeah.
Good thing we only have a 4-pack.
Yeah.
8.4. Wow.
8.5.
8.5. Okay.
It's 4-pack.
Hazy, a double dry hopped hazy IPA, 8.5%.
So you're 0 for 2 so far.
Brewery.
Last one's a brewery.
Okay. Is this a brewery that we might travel to?
It's
coming up. Is it on the list?
It's potentially on the list.
Okay. Is it in a smaller town or a bigger town? Or
it's in a bigger area.
Okay.
Like a very big area.
Des Moines?
Well, that area. Yeah.
Okay. So it's in the Des Moines area.
Yeah. Our football team lost to this city's football team in the state championship one year when we were in high school.
So that would be West Des Moines?
Nope.
No?
Unless I'm mistaken on high school football. It's in Ankeny.
Ankeny. Okay. Yeah, maybe we did. Yeah, we did lose to Ankeny in a championship game. Okay, so it's in Ankeny. Now I got to go to the list and look.
Yeah, go to the list.
All the breweries
we have
Ankeny.
had this brewery before.
Firetrucker?
It is Firetrucker.
All right, there you go.
All right, man. Well,
So,
I'll give that to you. I'll say that you got the brewery.
Firetrucker, 8.5%. What's the name? What's the can look like? I gotta see.
Let's open it up. So I've already got mine open here. It's one I've never even seen before, so I don't know how new it is.
Ooh.
It is the Firetrucker Tropical Burn Mango Double IPA. So
Nice.
I don't know how much mango I'm getting.
I'm not getting a lot of mango.
But that's not to say it's not a great beer. It's a really good beer. It has like a... If I had never tried it and didn't know exactly what it was, I feel like just tasting it, I'd say something similar to what you said. I'd probably say like an ambery IPA. instead of a hoppy amber. Same thing. It's just,
But the color makes sense with the mango, I think. And now that I know that it's a mango, I can taste the mango. And I think that's what adds a lot of the sweetness to it.
Yeah, I'm still getting a lot of, and maybe it's just my taste, the caramely vibes to it a little bit.
Since you said it, that's
that aftertaste a little bit in a great way. I like this one a lot. What do you think?
Yeah, I do too. Double IPA with sweet citrus and mango flavors. Well-balanced hops. Beer is art, it says.
I don't see anywhere where it says what hops they use, but there's a QR code on there. Maybe I'll scan that at one point and try to figure it out. But yeah, Firetrucker, really good. I like this a lot.
Good stuff. I like it.
I think the only thing that would keep me from getting this a lot of times and getting a lot of it is that high alcohol content.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you're looking for one or two to enjoy and to really end your day, and maybe it's just me, maybe 8.5, which is quite a bit for me. Maybe that's, nothing for some people. But for me, if I was going to have one or two of these, it would be like my last one or two of the day.
Yep.
And I would enjoy it very much. So yeah, good one. Firetrucker Tropical Burn Mango Double IPA. And unless you have any thoughts on it right now, we can kind of give a fully rounded thought on it towards the end of the episode.
Let's enjoy the rest of what we've got here, and we can talk about it in a little bit.
Yeah. Skol.
Skol. All right. So you rounded up a few articles for us to hit really quick. It's been a few weeks since we've really touched on like Vikings news.
Yep.
And of course, we're kind of in the like lull of the off season here. Most of the players aren't even at the facility. They're on vacation, sipping Mai Tais on the beach.
And good for them.
Something, So not a lot of news coming out of the NFL right now. But of course there are some storylines that we're following, and with a lot of the stuff that's happened in the off season, that has kind of dictated a lot of what could happen. That the writing is starting to kind of appear on the wall a little bit, so to speak, in terms of what could happen here in the future. So we got a couple of things here to talk about. First, we could talk about Dalton Reisner. So the Vikings brought him back, which is exciting. And Dustin Baker, our friend of the show, wrote an article talking about how that could be kind of an undercover roster battle.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were all super stoked, or most fans were pretty stoked when they re-signed Reisner. I feel like at worst you just didn't care, because he's not a player that, I don't think he's very divisive. It's just, I feel like you either love Reisner and are super happy that he's on the team again, or, I mean, you can take him or leave him. I think we were both in the camp of, we like the guy. He's a good dude. He's great in the locker room. He seems to be very good on the field, and the offensive line in general in 2023 seemed to skyrocket pretty good once he cracked the starting lineup. Now, there's probably some factors to that. I don't know if maybe something was going on with Ezra Cleveland, who obviously is very good. He just got a pretty decent contract with Jacksonville. Or maybe Ed Ingram started to figure some things out that he hadn't been figuring out, or the ball just bounced the Vikings' way a couple of times as far as the offensive line went, But yeah, he did seem to be an upgrade last year, and we were both excited when he signed. However, when he did sign, once we figured out the details, it was like the same or even less money than Blake Brandel is getting, which, hey, if Brandel gets the starting job and if he's the guy, then that's fine. That's awesome. I think we're both fans of the team first and then the players. But yeah, Dustin Baker's article kind of talks about how that is going to end up being more of a battle for Reisner to get a starting job, whether it's on the left or right. At the guard spot. And he kind of outlines too, Dustin Baker had a tweet sometime in the last week or so. It was a poll and basically asking like, hey, Vikings fans, if you had to choose, if it was up to you, if you had to choose, what would your combination of starting guards be? And he listed out the handful of combination of guards with Reisner, Brandel, and Ingram, all options at the various spots. And what did that poll end up looking like, Ev?
Yeah, so the majority says they would prefer, or they think the most likely outcome is Reisner on the left and Ingram on the right.
Interesting. Okay.
41.6%. What I find interesting about the poll is the next most popular option was Reisner and Brandell, left and right. Ingram on the bench.
Which is interesting. I think it also, that kind of shows what fans do and don't really know. Fans like you and me, we like the names. You know, we like the team first, obviously, but we also like the names. And we saw Reisner be the guy to make things step up, like I just said. So we automatically think, oh, they signed Reisner back, pencil him in, he is the starting guard. But then we also know Brandell has kind of been there a little bit. Some fans still remember the struggles that Ed Ingram had his first season and then the first couple of games of last season. So I can see kind of why a poll like that might end up with Reisner or Brandell rather than Reisner and Ingram. I could also see any one of those combinations be true. And frankly, as fans, and something Dustin said on our show just a handful of weeks ago, we should be pretty comfortable trusting Kevin O'Connell and his regime in their decisions on the offensive line because they tend to be productive decisions regardless of who's in there. We should just thank the coaches and trust that they know what they're doing because they've proven that they've known what they're doing. The line is one of the better ones in the league.
I think our offense will have a little bit of an identity crisis to figure out.
To begin with, yeah.
Because it's been Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson for so long. And that's made the offense, and naturally it's been this way with Kevin O'Connell calling the plays too, just naturally a pass-heavy scheme, which has worked really well when you have a high-level quarterback throwing to the best receiver in the league, whenever he's not double and triple teamed.
Even so.
Even then, he still makes amazing catches. So I think this position battle specifically will come down to what is our offensive identity going to be. Reisner started last year because we were a pass-heavy offense. We didn't have a run game to speak of, and his biggest flaw is that he's not a run blocker.
Yeah. He's a better pass blocker than he is a run blocker.
Yes. That's better said. But I think Reisner, Brandell, it's going to come down to, are we a run-first offense or a pass-first offense? And that remains to be seen. We don't even know who the starting quarterback is going to be.
At this moment, if there was a game tomorrow, it'd be Sam Darnold, yeah.
But, there's a lot still to be determined that way. Training camp is a whole other thing. Preseason. And it's all new. We're dealing with all new stuff in terms of those offense skill position players, running backs and quarterbacks specifically. So a lot remains to be seen, and I think that will determine who gets the starting job and who doesn't.
Yeah, and like I said, I feel like as fans, really with any position, but this battle specifically, whatever shakes out, we should be able to trust the coaches, and I think whatever the coaches decide, it will be a vetted decision, a thought-out decision, and one that will be the best for the team. What would be great, and I think just it's already a positive, is the fact that we're saying Brandell, a guy who has been, the sixth offensive lineman for many years now, to even talk about him as a potential starting candidate. That should give us some confidence in him because the coaches wouldn't have made the moves they did, waited so long to sign Reisner the way they did if they didn't have confidence in Brandell. They would have, and maybe they tried, but they would have signed some big name free agent guard. I don't even know who was or wasn't available a few months ago, but they would have fought a lot harder to upgrade that position, but they didn't. So we should already, just based off that, feel pretty good about Brandell as a player.
Yeah, and I don't have anything negative to say about Brandell. Reisner quickly elevated himself to like a fan favorite, just kind of with his post-game locker room interviews and even some of just the stuff we caught on the field. The leg kick is something that comes to mind. But he's definitely Reisner's got the bigger personality. Brandell's a little more. I'm comfortable to kind of be in the background and do my job in the trenches. I think both guys will make the 53-man roster.
Yeah, I think barring injury or some crazy trade or just steep drop off, I agree with you. I don't think either of these guys will be cut unless it is something like, hey, they're even and we really can go one way or the other. So maybe one guy is a tradable asset. I don't know. And I think in that scenario, you'd probably trade a Reisner because you have more stability contract wise with Brandell. But yeah, that's a whole nother thing to think about weeks from now. So
you have to like where the Vikings offensive line is at. I mean, you're returning all 5 starters.
Yeah. Barring injury, you have the best tandem. You could argue a top 5 in the NFL tackle tandem.
Yep.
Sorry, I totally cut you off there,
No,
but I'm agreeing with
you.
Garrett Bradbury, who I was ready to write off, especially after the early season back injury last year. I figured, okay, that's got to be it. That back injury, that's going to be the career killer for him. No, he came back, and we didn't complain about him once after he came back. He kind of had a resurgence. He didn't get bullied around the same as he always had. It's like he finally got healed or he finally figured something out. So Bradbury, I'm super stoked for. I'm excited for him.
And you've got Quessenberry, who can back him up adequately.
Well, he's a tackle. Quessenberry is.
Is he? Oh,
Yeah,
I thought he was a center.
But
Who am I thinking of that played center then? That
Schlottman. And I believe he's on like the Patriots or the Giants or something now, which I was kind of bummed when he left. I think he got a good deal, so good for him. But as far as a Vikings fan, I was kind of sad when Schlottman left. But Brandell was that tackle backup, and now that's a whole other thing. Brandell's moving to the inside now, which is another thing. If they have so much confidence in him, even with a position change, that's another thing to be excited for.
Dan Feeney, that's the guy they signed in the offseason.
I just don't. I think it's a waste of a roster spot. Maybe he's a good dude, but I don't see it. He's going to be somebody that we don't talk about once the season starts. And if we do, it's because of injuries, and we're going to be saying how awful he is. Sorry, Dan. I don't know why I hate you so much.
Hot take right there. Well, anyways, all that to say, I think the offensive line is in a really good spot. I'm excited. I'm happy for some consistency. That's been a position group that has really struggled in recent seasons for the Vikings. So to have that consistency, to have those guys back in another year under Kevin O'Connell and that system, I think it's just going to make them better.
Yeah.
So
yeah, really that whole group since Hutchinson left has been such a wishy-washy, good, bad, mostly bad unit for the Vikings. And you're right. I agree with you. It's been at least consistent. It hasn't been consistently 32nd in the league the last year or two. It's been at least middle of the pack, if not a shade better. And I mean, really, how can you complain about that?
You can't.
Yeah.
You also can't complain about rumors that Cam Akers might be coming back.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm definitely on board with bringing him back. Excuse me. One, he won't command a high value contract, which for this year, that sucks for him. But if he does come back to any team and proves that he can play, he's a perfect prove it deal candidate. So yeah, one, he won't be very expensive. Two, he's familiar with this regime. He's been with O'Connell since they were both with the Rams. And three, if he's healthy, which no news source or anything has said he's not recovered well. So if he's healthy, I mean, last year you could argue he was the best running back on the roster for all of the season until he got injured. The one awesome run that Josh Dobbs had,
he was the lead blocker.
The Falcons play, yeah, he like leveled a 300-pound defensive lineman, and got up. That wasn't the play he got injured. He made that play. He's a good football player.
Agreed.
However, I think the biggest thing with him is he back to full health, and does his Achilles tear again? I feel like once you tear it twice, that's almost a career ender. If you tear one, if you get a third Achilles tear, my goodness. But
how old is Cam Akers?
I think he's 24. He might be 25. He was, I believe, a second-round pick to the
25.
Rams in 2020. So same age-ish as Justin Jefferson.
So he if he's added, if they get him, and if he's healthy and good, he would lower the average age in the running back room quite a bit, because it's on the older edge. I feel like for running back rooms, you got Myles Gaskin, who's 37, Aaron Jones is 33.
You're looking at jersey numbers.
But you're right.
Aaron Jones, he is about to be 30. I think he'll turn 30.
Aaron Jones is 29
in the season.
That's deceiving.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that was fun.
That was funny. My mistake.
But to that point, though, it is a crowded running back room. It's a room with, when your best running back, arguably, is Aaron Jones, who is about to be 30. And what have they always said about running backs at the age of 30? I mean, we heard it for a few years before Adrian left. Adrian Peterson, even, they were saying, when is he going to drop off? Like, it's a ticking time bomb. So, yeah, Cam Akers, I think he can only be a positive. It would be one thing if we were thinking, like, oh, they're going to sign him and they need him because they're going to put him at RB1. Like, that's probably not what you want to do. But he can only be a positive in the room, and if he gets signed now and beats somebody out in camp, even better. So... yeah, I don't know if you said it, but there was another article on Vikings Territory about him potentially re-signing. I guess Charlie Walters is saying, hey, if he passes some upcoming physical, they'll re-sign him. So that's definitely a possibility.
There you go. I'd be all for it.
Yeah. It can't hurt the team at all.
Yep. All right, one more Vikings Territory article that you rounded up for us here is focusing on Danielle Hunter and Kirk Cousins and how they are still costing the team quite a bit of money, but that will be all over shortly, in about 8 months, less than a year.
So the article, again, I think it was another Dustin Baker article, definitely on VikingsTerritory.com. Go check out that website. They're awesome. Their stuff is good, and you're only going to get facts over there. So check them out. Shameless plug for somebody who's not sponsoring us, but we like them over there. So actually, keep tuned for next week. We may have a Dustin Baker appearance on the Skol Hop, so that'll be pretty fun. Anyways, this article we were talking about is really focusing on how the Vikings are one of the higher ranking teams in most dead money for this season, which what that means is, every team has a salary cap every year. It's a amount of money you're allowed to spend on your players every year. I think this year I don't even know what it is, but you're kind of looking it up. The Vikings rank pretty high in the amount of salary cap that is going towards players that aren't even on the team anymore. So that dead money. And the two biggest culprits for who's, accounting for most of that dead money is Kirk Cousins and Danielle Hunter. I think they have somewhere around $50 million worth of dead money. So money going to players that aren't on the team. And again, most of that is going to Kirk Cousins and Danielle Hunter. Not that the Vikings are paying them right now, but that smarter people than me can talk about the NFL salary cap and how all that works. But they're still on the books. Essentially, those two players are still on the books. However, after this season, they'll go from one of the most dead money teams in the league to one of the least dead money teams in the league. And that article kind of talks about how that switch from most to least is really a sign of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and how he and the front office deal with contracts in comparison to how Rick Spielman and the last regime dealt with contracts. So that's a good read. You learn a little bit more about salary caps and the NFL salary than you would have before you read it. Did you read the whole thing? Did you skim some of it?
I didn't read all of it, but I got the gist. And yeah, I do like what he has to say about how this situation that the Vikings are in is an indicator of Kwesi kind of making his mark on the franchise. And Dustin has the line at the end of his article here. He says the competitive rebuild is over.
Yeah.
Like, that was always kind of the plan when Kwesi took over, was we're going to stay competitive and rebuild this team. Well, the rebuild part is over. Now it's time to be competitive.
Yep. And that's not to say that having dead money on the books it's not necessarily a bad thing. It would be bad if it was something like, I don't know, you had a quarterback that you paid $200 million and had this big old contract, and then he came out to have some huge scandal where he just was inappropriate with a bunch of massage therapists, and then you had to cut him. But you're still on the hook for those $200 million, and that's where it would be bad. However, with the whole Kirk Cousins is taking a lot of dead money situation, that was just kind of the way Rick Spielman would deal with contracts. Some people would say it's kicking the can down the road. You can pay a guy $2 now and then have him book on the books for $2,000 later. That kind of idea. But I think it's just another tool that you can use to build rosters. And if you use it too much, use these void years in contracts and this dead money. If you use it too much, it's definitely going to kill you eventually. Every dollar hits the cap. You have to account for everything sometime. But if you're able to kind of maneuver things around and stretch things around, it can be a good tool to use. One thing Dustin mentions is that the Vikings have the ability, if J.J. McCarthy ends up being at least okay, they have the ability to run the next few years with a cheap quarterback salary, which usually your quarterback is one of your highest paid players on the team, as they should be. It's the most important position. But Dustin also does bring up the valid points of Justin Jefferson. His cap hits are going to start going up and up and up after 2024. And theoretically, hopefully, the Vikings re-sign not Dalton Reisner. Well, that would be nice, but Christian Darrisaw. And he's another guy that in the future will have higher cap hits. So it's all a numbers game. I'm not smart enough to understand it fully. Definitely not smart enough to explain it. So you guys can all start waking back up. We're going to get more interesting on the podcast here. But definitely read that article.
It is interesting to know, and we'll have the link to all three of those articles in the description, both on Spotify and YouTube. So if you're interested in that, make sure you go check out Vikings Territory. But today's July 1st. We're recording on Monday, July 1st, and that's Bobby Bonilla Day.
Yeah,
which is we've referenced this on the show, but I don't know that we've ever gone into detail about him. But he is a 61-year-old former New York Mets baseball player who gets paid every year $1.1 million on July 1st. And he will continue to get paid that amount until 2035.
Yeah, and that was a whole deal. I don't know the ins and outs, but enough to be able to explain the high-level version of it. Basically, the Mets, when they re-signed him, he apparently was a pretty good player, but in order to absorb that contract that they were going to give him, they just basically said, like, hey, for the next however long, 50 years, however long it was, we're gonna spread out your salary so that we can still sign you and still have a really good player on our roster, but you're just gonna be on our books forever, basically. Still another 11 years from now. And that was did you see when he signed that contract? However long ago it was? Was it in the 80s?
I would have to guess it would be that long ago. I mean, he hasn't played in a long time.
Maybe it was the 90s. I mean, it was a long time ago, and yeah, that is probably not a very smart financial decision. I think Shohei Ohtani got a somewhat, not as extreme, but a kind of ish similar type of lengthened deal from the Dodgers. I might be wrong on that.
It was in 2000 is when he got
I was way off.
The payday.
Okay. So they basically signed a guy for a few years and stretched it out for 35 years. That would be one thing I'd be upset if the Vikings signed anybody to a kind of contract like that. I don't even think it's allowed anymore.
Yeah, it's just not really an NFL thing either. No. Like, maybe that happens in baseball still a little bit, but...
Well, their salaries are guaranteed too. NFL is guaranteed to a certain amount, but not all of it.
There's not nearly the salary cap restrictions that there are in Major League Baseball, and team budgets are different in baseball than they are in football. So, yeah, baseball is kind of a whole different animal. It's still one of the reasons why Moneyball's my favorite movie.
Yeah, for sure. It's an interesting topic that can get boring, and you have to have at least a specific understanding of it. And I have like 1% enough understanding of it.
And I have like 0.1%.
That's giving me way too much credit there. No.
I'm just trying to be real here.
Either way, the cap is a myth, and these teams will sign your favorite players if they're good enough. Like Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
Who has signed his first mega deal. He'll get another one for sure.
As long as he stays healthy and keeps producing, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right, man. Let's dive into our I say final segment of the day, but it's probably going to be a few minutes.
Yeah. This will take us just a little bit longer, but we've tried to we're into let's back up here. Let's make sure people know what we're doing here. So we are in week number 3, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm counting that right. Week number 3 of going through all of the best Vikings to wear each jersey number. So we're in kind of the quiet part of the NFL offseason.
Hopefully quiet.
Quiet, yes.
If we're talking about our team on anything other than a guard roster battle and a potential RB3 signing and how the salary cap works, if we're talking about those things, that's fine. But if we're in July and we're talking about major news stories of our teams, it's probably not good. There's one way it could be good, like they re-sign a big name player, but usually it's, oh, this player got arrested, or oh, somebody's holding out and CeeDee Lamb is not going to come to training camp unless he gets a new contract, stuff like that. That's when you don't want to be talking about your team in July. So right now, the Vikings, knock on the Skol man sender, knock on wood, the Vikings don't have anything crazy like that going on.
Yeah, and so we've been going through each of the best Vikings to wear each jersey number. So we started a few weeks ago with jersey numbers 0 through 19. Yep. Last week we recapped
20 to 39.
20 to 39,
Mm-hmm.
and so this week we're going to hit 40 to 59. We've got a few more weeks to go in the series after that to kind of round out all 100 jersey numbers.
Yeah.
We're trying to tackle them 20 at a time over the course of 5 episodes.
Yeah. So we did mention the 30s specifically was a group of numbers where there weren't a lot of heavy hitters. Some historic Viking names that were definitely worthy of being talked about, and maybe it was good because I heard some names I'd never heard before, but they were pretty good. And there's some of those names sprinkled here in this list that we're going to talk about today. But yeah, the 30s are a number range that if you're an up-and-coming player, you want to make your mark, you want to own a number, maybe get it retired for you. Pick like 38 or 37, you know. But there's some numbers in the 40s and even the 50s too that you could really own it if you're an up-and-coming Viking and you want to be the best of all time to wear that number for that team. There's some opportunities. So
for sure. And I texted you earlier today.
Oh, yeah.
I sent you an article from operations.nfl.com where they explain kind of the new layout for jersey numbers and which positions can wear each one. So I thought it might be interesting to just really quickly recap that.
Yeah, because they changed the rules up twice in the last 3 or 4 years. So.
Yeah. So for the longest time, and actually this article has the history of it. There was another article too that I found. I don't know if I have that readily available, but anyways, for the longest time, it was very specific. These positions could wear these numbers and only these numbers. Mm-hmm. And it was pretty restrictive. And it wasn't until, the 2000s that they started to kind of open things up a little bit, and then last year they really opened up a lot of things and made most numbers available to most players.
For the most part, yeah.
For the most part. So quarterbacks are one of the most restricted positions. Quarterbacks can wear anything from 0 to 19. Mm-hmm. That's it. Punters and kickers have everything from 0 to 49 and then 90 to 99. Mm-hmm. So they've got 60 numbers at their disposal. Defensive backs can wear 0 to 49. Running backs, fullbacks, halfbacks can wear 0 to 49 or 80 to 89. Tight ends and wide receivers are in that same category. So basically if you're a running back, tight end, or receiver.
You can almost wear every number.
You can wear pretty much anything other than 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Yeah, the offensive lineman-ish numbers. Yeah,
and those are the offensive lineman and defensive lineman numbers. So offensive linemen can only wear 50 through 79. Defensive linemen can also wear 50 through 79 or 90 to 99.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have linebackers that basically have the full gamut of numbers other than the offensive lineman numbers.
Yeah. I'm remembering, I think it was Sheldon Rankins from a few years ago on the Vikings. In the preseason, he wore number 9. He's a defensive tackle and a large one. And in the preseason, he wore number 9, but there must be different preseason rules too, because he was allowed to for those 3 or 4 games at the time.
He'd have to wear 50 to 79 or 90 to 99.
Yeah,
now.
and I think he switched to like 90 or something like that. I don't remember. But that was a few years ago, obviously before they changed all these rules. But needless to say, before 2 or 3 years ago, like running backs and wide receivers and linebackers, they were pretty restricted on the number range they could wear, but now they're pretty wide open. And even kickers, they got pretty wide open as well with the new rules. So if you remember Reggie Bush, his USC days, he wore number 5, and it was kind of a big deal. He couldn't wear number 5 with the Saints when he got drafted because it wasn't allowed at the time. But now, I mean, Alex Madison wore number 2 for the Vikings last year.
Yep.
I think Brian Asamoah, he's going to wear number 2 for the Vikings this year, so assuming he makes a team. But yeah, all that to say, this exact segment in like 20 years will look a lot different because the numbers we're going to talk about today, there's a lot of defensive backs, a few linebackers, and like a couple of running backs that are on this list of best to wear for the Vikings. But this range could definitely change. Yeah,
for sure. And I could see somebody wanting some of these numbers in the future.
Yeah. All right, so the best number 40 in Vikings history. I kind of cheated for us a little bit. I went to profootballreference.com, and they kind of rank players with an approximate value number, and they explain how they get that number on their site. I've read it before. I don't exactly remember. I just know it's like an aggregation of their stats and awards they've earned in their career, kind of gives them like a number that's usually 1 to 100. Occasionally you see some guys reach above 100. But yeah, so what I did is I took all these players, I looked up Vikings to wear each number we're going to talk about, and I filtered the list of each number by their highest approximate value. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll see if we remember any other players to wear that number for the Vikings.
Sounds good.
All right, so number 40, I think without looking at this list, you and I would both say something like Jim Kleinsasser, Ivan Pace.
Jim Kleinsasser and Ivan Pace. Yeah, both of them come to mind.
But I mean,
for sure.
Even Red Ellison, he was good for a couple of years for the Vikings. There was a player, Charlie West, from 68 to 73, who has a higher approximate value score of 24 than anyone else in Vikings history. So a defensive back, Charlie West, I guess he is the best Viking to wear number 40.
And he was a pretty good punt returner and kick returner. He had, he played way before our time in the early days of the Vikings, and in arguably some of the more successful years of the Vikings. He was a Viking for 6 years from 68 to 73 before he went to Detroit. And then he ended his career in Denver. But his rookie season in 68, he had the longest punt return in the NFL of 98 yards.
Holy cow.
And then
in 1960, that's crazy for that time too.
The following year, his sophomore campaign, he had the most punt returns in the league, 39.
Which might say some good things about the defense in 69. So
there you go. So Charlie West, best to wear number 40.
Yeah. All right, number 41, was a running back by the name of Dave Osborne with an AV, or approximate value, of 56. He played for the Vikings for 11 years, from 65 to 75.
Yeah, and I've heard his name quite a bit. Really good running back. Obviously, way before our time. He spent most of his career in Minnesota before going to the Packers for one season at the end of his career. So that's kind of interesting.
The next best, according to Pro Football Reference 41, is Anthony Harris, who really only had one good year with the Vikings.
But he was a good defensive back.
He was decent.
He had 6 picks in 2019.
And that earned him a franchise tag, and then he never did anything after those 6 picks.
That's
true. Yeah, flashy year. I'm sure he's a good dude, but fizzled out real quick.
He had a lot of tackles. He was a tackle machine, it looks like, in 2020. But yeah.
Yeah.
Not near the defensive back that he was in terms of interceptions and whatnot in 2019.
Yep.
That was COVID too. It was kind of a weird time.
Weird year. All right, number 42. Who do we got here?
Well, you have on the list that we've created here John Gilliam, 72 to 75. I'm thinking Andrew DePaula right now.
Right now, absolutely.
Long snapper.
Gilliam, though, was a wide receiver to wear number 42.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. What were some of his stats? Let's look at those quick.
Minnesota's one stop along the way of his career, although I think he was the one that he only played 4 years with the Vikings, and he made 4 Pro Bowls in his career, and they were the only years he was with the Vikings. So his best years of his career were with the Vikings. So it makes sense. Also, I don't know how that AV number works. I assume that approximate value is like of their whole career. So there's a chance some of these guys played not as good with the Vikings, but then moved on and played better somewhere else. So that's kind of a little asterisk on this list here.
The best season of his career receiving wise was 72, his first year with the Vikings.
Yeah.
1,000 yards, 22 yards per catch, 7 touchdowns. He had 8 touchdowns the following year, and he had 9 touchdowns one year with St. Louis in 69. So not the most touchdowns of his career, but arguably one of the better years of his career. Started every game. So, yeah, pretty good wide receiver, just a little bit before our time.
And the Vikings were his third team, too. So that's kind of interesting. You don't see... I feel like the league changes, too. So if you're on your third team, usually you're not about to make your first Pro Bowl. Usually that's just a series of one-year deals, and then you fizzle out.
But, I mean, back in the 70s, I think the NFL was just a little bit different, too, in terms of how that played out. Some other interesting and notable 42s from our era, for sure. You got Ben Gedeon.
Oh, yeah, linebacker. He came in because they changed up the rules for linebackers at one point. For a while, they couldn't wear anything lower than number 50. But then I think right when he came in, Ben Gedeon, they changed it to open up all the 40s for all the linebackers, too. So he was probably one of the first Vikings linebackers to wear 42.
You also got Darren Sharper, who came over from the Packers.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about that guy.
But still a decent player in his own right.
Did a lot of noteworthy things in his free life. Now, I don't think... I would imagine he's still in jail. I think he got quite a hefty sentence for his transgressions there. But yeah, that was 42. Anyone else? Jerome Felton. He was kind of fun for a couple of years as a fullback.
Yeah. Orlando Thomas.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Late 90s, early 2000s. And Andrew DePaula, although his average value is quite low.
He's a long snapper, but he is an all-pro.
I would say, he's valuable. You want a good guy snapping the ball in those situations on punts and field goals and extra points.
Absolutely. So. He's kind of the long snapper position. I'm trying to say this the way I mean it, because I mean it to be very, very complimentary of that position. But it's one of those, it's kind of like the pinky toe. You don't think about it too often.
Yep.
But if you have a bad one, it can ruin your life. If you've ever had a broken pinky toe nail or something, or even a broken pinky toe, it's the only thing you can think about. It's the worst ever. But if your pinky toes are good, one of my phrases I say all the time is like, oh, I'd rather have my pinky toe chopped off than what did I just say earlier before we started recording? Like, I'd rather have than a bug flying in my nose. That's what I said. And probably pretty crazy because the pinky toe is very important. So the long snapper is very important. If you have a good one or even just a regular okay one, you don't care because they're doing their job. But the second you have a guy that can't snap the ball to the holder, you can lose games off that. So DePaula, please keep playing as long as you're good. And I don't care if you're 70 years old. If you're good, keep playing. We like you.
All right, moving on to number 43.
Yeah.
I forgot about this, and I think he's changed numbers since then. He's not the best yet. Could be, maybe. Cam Bynum.
Yeah.
Wore that number for a couple seasons.
Yeah, I think he was 43 at least his first year. Yeah, I think just his first season in 2021. That dude is on the rise. I first really got to know him when he was on Ben Lieber's podcast a few years ago. It was like right after his first season. He seems like a great dude. He's another one the Vikings have had no issues putting out in front of the media and kind of highlighting and talking about. I think a big story of his from a year or two ago was his wife had some issues with her visa. She was couldn't get to the U.S. or move to the U.S. She was in the Philippines, I believe. Mm-hmm. I think that's all figured out now. But yeah, he's a good player on the field, and one of the reasons Lewis Cine can't get on the field. So keep being good there, Cam.
Yeah, for sure. Nate Wright, though, from 1971 to 1980, he has the highest AV of anybody to wear the number 43.
For the Vikings, yeah. So this kind of reminds me to say, like, if we have any listeners that were fans, or even if you're a kid, and you remember some of these names, obviously these were guys that were good. It's just Evan and I were born in the early 90s, so we weren't even awake to the Vikings until at least the mid to late 90s. So a lot of these really cool and really good players that mean a lot to the team, we have no idea who they are. Nate Wright, who had a lot of stats, played a lot of 10 years for the Vikings.
Yeah.
129 games. How many? 31 interceptions just in Minnesota. Like, that's a good dude, and we would love to sit and reminisce about, how awesome Nate Wright was. We just weren't alive then. So let us know. How do you feel about these guys that were in the 60s and 70s and 80s, We want to hear your thoughts of watching them on TV or hearing them on the radio.
And we've got good stats here, like Pro Football Reference, where we can kind of get a glimpse into the past a little bit. And we can see Nate Wright, for example, had 31 picks for the Vikings. Unfortunately, none of those were touchdowns, but 31 interceptions is nothing to scoff at. Like,
yeah. That's almost as much as Harrison Smith. Like,
that's awesome.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So, and a handful of fumble recoveries along the way as well, and one touchdown in that, right? Looks like. So yeah, all in all, Nate Wright, good defensive back.
Yeah,
and arguably the best to wear number 43.
44 is a fun number for the Vikings. We got a few names. We got Matt Asiata. Asiata.
That dude was fun to watch.
He was just a hammer. He's not. He was never the home run hitter, but he would just punch your way through. I think I've mentioned this even recently on the podcast. He had the game where he had like 30 rushes for 50 yards and 3 touchdowns. Yep. Like the yardage doesn't really blow your mind away, especially when you think about he had, almost a little bit better than a yard per rush, but 3 touchdowns, like that guy's just a hammer. And he's got a good story too. I think he was working in like a warehouse and then got a phone call to come try out for the Vikings. But Matt Asiata was good. Josh Metellus right now, who just clone him 10 times. You have 11 Josh Metelluses, and you can have a decent NFL defense. I mean, the line might not hold up forever, but he plays everywhere. He's a fun story right now. And I hope he gets another contract extension, because I think he's only up for another 2 years with the Vikings. But then who's the best listed out?
Chuck Foreman.
Chuck Foreman,
Fullback, running back.
Rookie of the year. One of the first rookies of the year for the Vikings.
Rookie of the year. He got quite a few MVP votes in his second and third seasons, and he was a Pro Bowler the first 5 seasons, it looks like, with the Vikings. So, yeah, really good career with the Vikings. Some of the stats that stick out to me, again, this is kind of before our time, but he had 1,000 rushing yards, over 1,000 rushing yards in 3 seasons from 75 to 77. He had he led the league in combined rushing and receiving touchdowns twice. His sophomore campaign in 74 and then 2 years later in 76.
Rushing and receiving?
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yep. And I think he was a pretty effective receiver out of the backfield. He led the league in 75 in receptions with 73.
Jeez.
So
that's wild. So obviously I've known Chuck Foreman to be a great player forever. He is one of the few guys that played in the early years of the Vikings that his name means something. You know, the Paul Krause, the Chuck Foreman, the Fran Tarkenton, the Mick Tingelhoffs. You know, there are some guys that we know about. When we were in high school, I got the chance to meet him. He was at like some Walmart event one time, and I rushed out and got a picture with him, and he signed one of my favorite Vikings mementos. I have a print of Fran Tarkenton either tossing a quick pass or handing off to Chuck Foreman, and I have Chuck Foreman's signature on that print, and it'll never happen, but I'd love to get Fran's signature on that same print. I almost need to carry it around and like just walk around wherever Fran lives.
There's Fran Tarkenton, sign this.
I think I would cry if I ever got that print signed by Fran Tarkenton, just to have both of them. But yeah, he's Chuck Foreman, great player, good personality too. He's actually a decent Twitter follow right now, even still today.
I think that picture of you and Chuck Foreman might need to make its way into the thumbnail for this video.
I was just thinking about that. Listeners, you'll know now already before you clicked on anything if that was the thumbnail. But I might have to make that happen because I do have pretty quick access to that Polaroid. However, I'm a weird looking high school kid. I think some of my family's in that picture too. We'll figure it out. We'll make something happen.
We can Photoshop some stuff if we need to.
we need to get good on Photoshop. If you've seen our thumbnails, you know we need to get good on Photoshop. Anyways, yeah, Chuck Foreman, great Viking, great 44. Yeah, we're about to enter a weird section of numbers, kind of the rest of the 40s, where there's some guys with decent Pro Football Reference value numbers, but guys I've never really heard of outside of one. Who's the best of 45, Ev?
Ed Schrockman, which is not a name that I know very well, and that's because he was on the first Vikings team ever in 1961. But he had a fumble recovery for 88 yards, which led the league, and a touchdown in 1962. One of the more notable stats there. He had a handful of interceptions pretty much every season. He played his whole career with the Vikings.
Yeah, he's a guy that right now with those numbers, like people would be buying his jersey. He would be getting a high free agency contract. And maybe he did in terms of the 70s and 60s, but really mostly the 60s. But yeah, I think he is the guy that in that group of, I'm glad they played because if we didn't have them, we wouldn't have the NFL as we know it now. Like every Viking should know that name, but it's unfortunate that I just saw his name for the first time today. And he's one of the better Vikings in team history, just based off of numbers.
Some other number 45s that stand out to me, Troy Dye.
Yeah, the current... Well, I don't know if he's currently on the team.
He might not be. I don't know.
think his contract expired at the end of last season. I might be wrong on that. Sorry, Troy, if I am. But yeah, a good special teams player, linebacker, drafted in 2020. I guess he started a few games, 8 games in his Vikings career, at least so far. I don't think the Vikings re-signed him.
He's with the Chargers.
Okay, all right. Well, following Eric Kendricks, whose name might come up later. But yeah, outside of... So there's Ed Shirachman and then someone named Tom Hannon, which I'm probably offending a lot of people here. Defensive back from the 70s and 80s. Another guy I'd never really figured out. He had 15 interceptions.
Those were kind of the dog days of being a Vikings fan, though. Like the 80s specifically were a rough decade.
The early 80s, yeah, for sure. 83, wasn't that the worst record in team history?
It might
or at
be.
least tied for. But then outside of, Troy Dye, Shirachman, and Hannon, those are the names. And even Dye, he's got an AV of 7. So, like, everybody else is less than half of that. So that's a number that if you can be better than a 1960s defensive back who had pretty good numbers, you can really own 45 for the Vikings.
The next number is even more sparse.
Yeah, this is a come get me number.
Yep.
If you can be better than Ursel McBee, who played for the Vikings from 65 to 69, what was he? A defensive back. If you can get more than 15 interceptions in your career, you will own number 46 for the Vikings. So come get it.
It's a good linebacker number.
Yeah.
I think if you're, I'm going to check the linebacker. Oh, yeah, 0 to 59.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you're a linebacker and you're looking for a good number, 46.
I will argue with this Pro Football Reference rating scale right now. I will go ahead and say that Colin Loeffler, long snapper for the Vikings, who has an AV of 21, which is half of Ursel McBee's AV. I will argue that Colin Loeffler is the best Viking to wear number 46.
That's fair.
He was a long snapper for 11 seasons, and did we ever complain about him?
Nope.
I think we only every once in a while he'd have like some crazy awesome tackle on like a punt return or a punt play or whatever, but he might be Mr. Consistent for the Vikings. He did his job every time he was asked, and I don't even remember, was he just old? Did he just retire? Is that why he wasn't on the Vikings anymore?
I would expect so. He played 10 seasons.
Yeah. I think it went from Loeffler to Connor McDermott.
Sounds right.
And yeah, I don't know if it was just... Maybe it was just a camp battle that didn't go his way at the end of his career. At 33, so he played until he was 33, 34 years old. Colin Loeffler, great Viking. Come on the pod. We'll welcome you on.
For sure. He was the long snapper of our kind of high school, college era of Vikings fanhood.
I'm not even lying. If Colin Loeffler came on the podcast, that would be freaking awesome.
Would you fangirl a little bit?
Maybe a little bit. I don't know. Did I fangirl over Dustin Baker? That might be a similar thing.
A little bit.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll work on Colin Loeffler. I think he's got a social media preference.
47.
47. If it weren't for Joey Browner, this number would be wide open for anybody that wants to come get it. However, you're not going to be better than Joey Browner.
Nope.
Defensive back from 83 to 92, but with the Vikings through 91. I mean, what do you have?
He was a Pro Bowler 6 times. He was AP All-Pro 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
In the late 80s, early 90s, which weren't terrible years for the Vikings, but they weren't the best either. No. So he was a standout player in his era for sure. One of the better players on the roster.
Just looking at his numbers, I'm getting Harrison Smith vibes.
Yeah, for sure.
He's got 37 interceptions for the Vikings, which is that Harrison Smith. We can probably look it up.
I'll look it up.
He's probably got right around 36, 37. interceptions. And not that that's that's the flashy number, that's the sacks for a defensive end. But yeah, Joey Browner and Harrison Smith might be very similar numbers wise.
Harrison currently has 34 interceptions.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, all right. Joey Browner, he is without question the best 47 in Vikings history. But if it weren't for that, you would have had to beat long snapper Kevin McDermott for the highest AV, which Kevin McDermott, 4 seasons with the Vikings, long snapper, again, only ever did his job. You can't complain about that.
I think the best thing about the Vikings to have worn number 47 are their names. Because you've got guys like Tough Borland. Wasn't he Australian?
I don't know. I'm hearing his name for the first. You might as well have just said Al Borland.
Oh, no, he wasn't. He's from Illinois. Sorry, Tough.
Yeah, that's pretty tough there.
But then there's another one from 2020, Hardy Nickerson. What a name. Hardy Nickerson.
And that's a modern name. That dude's still walking around. He's younger than us.
Yeah. So some cool names in number 47 history for the Vikings.
Yep.
What about 48?
48.
Matt Asiata wore that number.
Did he?
For a season, 2012, it looks like.
Interesting. I didn't know that. I always picture him in 44. So 48, the best they have listed is Najee Mustafa. And I guarantee I pronounced that at least not 100% right. But he's got a score of 24, which is okay. In the grand schemes of that AV score goes, starter level, but definitely could lose their job to somebody better.
He had 10 picks for the Vikings, defensive back, 10 picks for 195 yards, 1 touchdown, and he had one for 97 yards in 1991.
Okay. But those 10 picks were all throughout 4 seasons, too. So,
yes.
I mean, that's 10 picks more than I'll ever even dream of having myself. But
no, you're right, 4 seasons. He played for the Vikings for 5 seasons, but he didn't really have any notable stats in 1987. But it looks like he was a decent contributor on defense. Couple of picks every year from 88 to 93. And then he went to Oakland and didn't do anything. And looks like that's where his career came to an end.
Yep. So another number, come get it, come own it. When I say that, like come get it, come own it, I always think of Sharif Floyd, who was a defensive tackle who wore number 73 for the Vikings. And I think he wore number 73 at Florida as well. And something I just will never forget is he had some quote where he said, like, somebody asked him, why do you wear 73? Like, don't you want to wear a flashier number? I think even his rookie year with the Vikings, Sharif Floyd wore number 95 because 73 wasn't available. And he just said 73 is my number. Like, it was assigned to me at one point in like high school or college, and he had a coach that was like, hey, the number doesn't matter. You matter. You make the number. So that's the point where Sharif Floyd really just like owned a 73, which for a defensive tackle is not the flashiest of numbers. So be a running back or a linebacker or defensive back or whatever and just own number 48, and you can have that. It'll get retired. Like you can be the best ever to wear 48 for the Vikings.
49, pretty similar. In fact, I'm looking at this list and I don't know any of these names on the list for number 49, and part of that's just because I'm too young probably to know any of these.
Dale Hackbart.
Yeah, Dale Hackbart is the best with an AV of 30. Mm-hmm. Played from 66 to 70. He was a defensive back. Looks like he bounced around the league quite a bit, especially in his early years. He was all over the place. Green Bay, Washington, then the Vikings, then St. Louis, then Denver to end his career. So he bounced around quite a bit.
I just noticed if you are on profootballreference.com and you click a certain player, it'll show you their stats by year. and one of the stats they show you is their AV for that year.
Yeah.
So we won't change anything on our list here, but we could have averaged it out for like all their Vikings years and had a more accurate number. So who is it? Dale Hackbart had an AV of his career for 30.
With the Vikings.
No, of his total career for 30.
Oh.
But with the Vikings, his highest was like 8. So, and none of his other years even came close to 30. So I don't know how that's all calculated.
And I don't know how it's calculated either, because if you go down to the bottom here where it says 5 years with the Vikings, and it kind of sums all of his stats with the Vikings, then his AV with the Vikings is 30.
Maybe the list we're going off is accurate to their Vikings time then. Because it does break it down for other teams too. Anyways,
I see a 30 on this. Oh yeah, he is.
Yeah.
So look at us. We're just figuring out.
Look at us.
All of this while we go. Skol.
Skol. Hey, thank you for being with us. Still, this is awesome.
Let's keep moving on. We've got 9 more numbers to go.
All right. Here, I say we blow past. We just quickly go through these numbers through the 50s, really. And if we can think of a player that isn't the best or isn't listed, or if it is the best, then we can talk about him for a minute. Because like Jim Hougf, Hougf, number 51, he's not who I would say is the best 51 for the Vikings, just because he played from 78 to 86, right before we were born. My best 51 is Ben Lieber.
We're still on 50.
Oh, son of a gun.
Hang on. Don't get ahead of yourself.
Well, you know what? Hey, we can clip that. We'll just we'll move that audio file right there. So 50.
50.
What do you think of?
The best one per Pro Football Reference in their AV ranking is Jeff Simon. He was a linebacker in the 70s, early 70s to early 80s, mostly middle linebacker.
Yep.
Looks like he was pretty decent. Pro Bowler 4 times and got some Defensive Rookie of the Year votes his rookie year. So
AV of 78. That's
good.
That's buy your kid his jersey worth of numbers. Like that's good.
There are some other just interesting names. This is a longer list. Number 50 is Pete Bursich.
Yeah, which you may know his name more for the Vikings Entertainment Network. He is the color guy for Paul Allen on the radio for KFAN during Vikings games. Good guy. I like him a lot. He's the guy that goes whoa during the Minneapolis Miracle replay. Go check that out. We'll link that maybe somewhere.
I want to clip that part of you doing that.
I was trying not to yell, but
my kids are sleeping. Don't wake them up. Come on.
I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna. but yeah, another name, Aaron Henderson, whose brother EJ, they played together for the Vikings for a while. Aaron is still pretty active on social media. I'm trying to think other names for this list.
Gerald Hodges had a year or 2 there for the Vikings where he was decent.
Mm-hmm.
So
Vinny Churchu, I think he came in the same time Ben Lieber did, free agents wise, but he only played for 1 year. So yeah,
a little bit of a longer list for 50. All right, 51 though.
51, I already said all I can say. It's not, for me, it's not Jim Hougf, which I'm very sorry. He's got an AV of 42, which is respectable numbers. Granted, I know that my AV is like negative 40 billion. So, but as far as compared to everybody else, 42 is pretty decent. Some people remember him. Please let us know. Comment if you remember him. Comment if you are him. That'd be cool. He can be on the pod.
Jim was a center and a guard, mostly left guard. Played all of his career with the Vikings from 78 to 86. So before our time. And center guard, that's just a really hard position to really statisfy.
I thought that was interesting. When I was typing things out, I thought he was an inside lineman. So, I don't know, maybe he bounced around a little bit.
But I would agree with you. Ben Lieber, for sure.
Me, it's Ben Lieber.
Gets my vote. And part of that's just because he's in a more statistically friendly position. But
Also, he's more visible to us, even since maybe even more since he retired. I hear him all the time on the Power Trip on KFAN.
Yep.
I follow him on Twitter. We watch his post game.
He's part of the Vikings Entertainment Network.
He is
very much involved with the team still.
Yeah, I mean this as a compliment. He is as entertaining and talented of a personality in media as he ever was a linebacker in the NFL.
He's a level-headed, very football knowledgeable commentary.
Yep.
And I appreciate that, especially in those post-game. That's really where I watch him the most, is those post-game recaps. It's usually him and one other Vikings Entertainment Network staffer down on the field, wherever they play. They travel with the team everywhere, and they just recap everything, and he kind of gives his hot take on what happened. And it's trustworthy because he's so
he may be
good.
One of the most, as far as former players in the league goes, he's one of the people that I trust and respect. His opinion are the two words that come to mind quickly, but I guess it is trust. If he says something, I'm gonna be like, hey, maybe I didn't think of that, but Ben Lieber said it, and maybe that is how things go in the locker room, or maybe that is how coaches talk to stuff like anything he says, and be like, all right, hey, Ben said it, I trust that. I'll respect whatever he said. He's been on Vikes Now with Dustin Baker a couple of times in the last few years. That's talk about fangirl. I would love it if we ever got him on the Skol Hop, and
that would be fun.
Yeah, it's an itch enough that, hey, I'm throwing it out. Ben Lieber, come on the show. We'd love to talk about 09, the way Meat Sauce makes fun of you about that pass interference call. We'd also love to talk about actually how good of a football player you were and how good of a media presence you are now. So come on, please come on our lowly show. We'd love it.
Number 52 is kind of a repeat.
I can't really think of anybody that that would be the best ever. So this is one where I agree with Pro Football Reference on who they say is the best ever Viking to wear 52, and who I would say immediately. Who is it, Ev?
Chad Greenway.
Chad freaking Greenway.
100%.
I think he wore number 18 with the Hawkeyes. And that'd be a fun question to ask him if he came in the league right now, or if when he came in, if the number rules were the same as they are right now, would he have continued with 18? Because he couldn't wear 18 when he got drafted. It wasn't allowed. But that would have been pretty sick. I don't know when he was drafted who wore that number, if he would have had to compete for it. But yeah, Chad Greenway, great Viking.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, obviously we're a little more biased because we're from Iowa, and he played for Iowa, and just to see him kind of go from just an hour down the road to playing for our favorite football team, and playing really well for our favorite football team for his entire career. He's a dude.
I think he's also, and I respect this, he's pretty proud of the fact that he was able to play for the Vikings his whole career. I've heard him say a few times, because there was one time he was franchise tagged, which he's one of the few players I've heard say, I loved it because I was guaranteed X amount of dollars. I'm sure on some level he didn't love it, but at least publicly he said he loved being franchise tagged. But yeah, we've said it a few times before, guys that love being Vikings, Harrison Smith comes to mind, Jim Kleinsasser, maybe even Dalton Reisner. Those guys love being Vikings, and I definitely group Chad Greenway into that. He seemed to love being a Viking and being in Minnesota. I think he still lives there today.
Yeah. Not a ton of super notable names on the 52 list. Some names before our time that we would probably get flack from the older generation for not mentioning,
not knowing,
like Dennis Johnson, Kylie Wong, who apparently played for them during the 98 season.
I was going to say, that name kind of sounds familiar.
Henry Crockett sounds familiar from the 02-03 season.
Okay. After that, though, it's a huge, starting with Henry Crockett, it's a huge drop off from the top three names.
Yep.
I would say that outside of Chad Greenway, that's another number you can come and own. But I mean, you'd have to be a Hall of Fame type player to usurp Greenway for the best to ever wear 52 for the Vikings.
What about 53?
Talk about Hall of Fame type players. This guy, a handful of episodes ago, I was surprised that this guy was undrafted. I didn't know until somewhat recently. Mick Tingelhoff, center number 53. He was the first guy to wear that number for the Vikings. He only ever played for the Vikings, and he only ever wore that number. He played from 62 to 78. He's a Hall of Famer. He was Fran Tarkenton's center. And they retired his number justifiably. Although I was surprised to learn today, I think I told you earlier, they didn't retire his number until like 20-some years after he retired from playing. Which was, I feel like that's not how it goes anymore. Like, if you're worthy of having your number retired, pretty much as soon as you retire from playing, they just retire your number. Unless your name is Randy Moss, which apparently the Vikings are never going to retire 84. Anyways, Mick Tingelhoff, I don't think there's any question, the best 53 of all time for the Vikings, maybe the best 53 of all time in the NFL. I would proudly wear his jersey.
The last person to wear that wore it in 99.
Yeah, it's crazy. Crazy that they let that number.
Kivusama Mays.
And I don't know
98 to 99.
him,
I don't know anything about him either, but that's the last time anybody will wear the number 53 in purple.
Yeah, and good for it.
Yep. What about 54?
54, there's probably a handful of decent linebackers on there. The best on the list is linebacker Fred McNeil, played from 74 to 85, so 12 years. I had never really known his name, but if you had asked me, I'd say Eric Kendricks, and that's Pro Football Reference agrees as far as he's right there. Kendricks has a score of 65, McNeil has a score of 69, so they're very close. I'd still give the nod to Kendricks. He played for 7 seasons with the Vikings, and was undersized and played oversized every play of his career. So for me, it's Eric Kendricks.
Anthony Barr actually wore that last year. When he came back,
which was fun, but still,
it was weird not to call him Eric Kendricks because you saw 54 running around and you're like, wait, that's not Eric, that's Anthony Barr.
Yep. All right, we got a few more, like 3 heavy hitters here between 55 and 59. So 55, the best ever listed is Scott Studwell, who basically spent, up until a couple of years ago, his entire adult life with the Minnesota Vikings organization. Played on the team from 77 to 90. He's got an AV of 91, and he's one of the few players on this list that has a score higher than 90. There's only 4 of them on this list. Mick Tingelhoff's the only other one we've talked about so far that have a score above 90. He was just consistent for many, 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 many years. And then after he retired, he joined the organization. I don't know how soon after he retired, but pretty soon. He joined the organization in the scouting area, and he helped shape the Vikings roster up until a year or 2 or 3 ago. He's been with the Vikings forever.
Yep. Some other good ones to wear 55. Anthony Barr, of course, we just mentioned him.
Yeah.
Wore 54 in the 23 season, but wore 55 for most of his career and the most notable years of his career, I would say, with the Vikings.
Then we've got Jack Del Rio, who you may know him as a coach.
Went on to coach, yeah.
Probably most people know him as a coach, but he played for the Vikings for 4 years, from 92 to 95. He wore 55. He kind of bounced around a little bit. He's definitely more accomplished as a coach than he was as a player, but he was a decent player. Total career AV score of 71, which is pretty darn good.
Zadarius Smith wore that number for a handful of games in 2002 or 22. Sorry.
I think he ended up being healthy for all of the games that year that he was with the Vikings.
He was fun to watch in a Vikings uniform.
He was really fun for the first half of that season.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if it was a combination of injury or what, but he kind of dropped off. But yeah, still very fun.
All right, moving on. 56.
So Pete Bursich wore 56 for most of his career with the Vikings, which is why I was a little surprised earlier when we talked about number 50. Bursich switched to 50 in the, 2000 season? Or the 99 season?
No, it was before that. 95 to 98.
Really?
Let's double check that.
Yeah.
But
so it lists the numbers they wore after their position.
56, 95 through 98, and then he switched to 50 in 2000.
Yeah, so Bursich wasn't on the team in 99 or missed it. For whatever reason, it's missing from the Pro Football Reference. Anyways, Bursich wore 56 for most of his Vikings career, except for that 2000 season. Otherwise, it's hands down. Here's the third guy with a score above 90, Chris Dolman.
Yeah.
He's got an AV score of 111. Played for the Vikings from 85 to 93, and then again in 1999. For a while, he was one of the highest sack leaders in NFL history.
Led the league in sacks in 1989.
He's a Hall of Famer, 8 Pro Bowls, a good Viking, and I think he sadly passed away just a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he's absolutely the best. Other ones might be E.J. Henderson comes to mind. Currently, it's Garrett Bradbury, but I don't think he's the best. He's just pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, 56. It's a good number.
57. Come get it. The best listed is Mike Merriweather, who played from 89 to 92. He's got a score of 33. So come get it. If you can be a few-time Pro Bowler and maybe even sign a second contract, you're probably better than who might be a good dude, Mike Merriweather. So, yeah, 57.
Dwayne Rudd from the late 90s was another 57. Audi Cole.
Oh, yeah. I remember Audi Cole. He had back-to-back pick sixes in the preseason one time. That was a lot of fun. But
yeah, that's definitely a number that somebody could come get if they wanted it. What about 58?
All right, Pro Football Reference, this guy has a score of 89. He played for the Vikings from 68 to 79. I had never heard his name before today. Wally Hilgenberg. So I'm sorry I've never heard your name. I would probably have your jersey if it was today. But it was just before my time.
He's a long-time Viking. He spent 12 years with Minnesota.
Yeah.
And not a huge contributor on defense as a linebacker, but good enough. They don't. I wonder if they didn't record tackles as a stat, because he's a linebacker here, which you would think, okay, he was involved in a lot of tackles, but he only has interceptions and fumbles, sacks and safeties as the main stat categories.
Well, and sacks weren't even official stat until like 82.
Right.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting. But he has a sack recorded in a handful of seasons in the mid-60s. Which is interesting. It says official since 82, based on play-by-play game film and other research since 1960. So it sounds like Pro Football Reference maybe kind of fills in the blanks a little bit.
Kind of gone back a little bit
with sacks. But anyways, yeah, reasonably good Viking for sure.
Sure. All right. Last but not least, and one of the best Vikings on the list. Here's the fourth guy above a 90 score with a 93 score. Played for the Vikings from 74 to 85. Linebacker Matt Blair.
Matt Blair.
Yeah.
Yep. I've definitely heard the name, but couldn't begin to tell you, other than looking at Pro Football Reference, how good he was. Pro Football Reference has him as a Pro Bowler for 6 seasons?
Nice.
So, and the Pro Bowl meant a whole lot more back in the 70s and 80s than it does today. So that's kind of cool.
I feel like being voted a Pro Bowler is still a high honor today, but it's still a popularity contest.
It's a lot different today.
They need to figure out that math equation.
Agreed. But yeah, he had some good years for the Vikings. Had a handful of interceptions every year. Forced some fumbles, or was involved in some fumbles. Had a few sacks here and there. So
yeah, very
nicely
good.
done. Yeah,
and that's it. That's 40 to 59. Did you think we missed anybody? Do you remember watching any of these players that we just totally skated over? Do you wish we would have mentioned somebody else? Let us know. How can they let us know?
You can send us a message. You can drop a comment. You could, if you're watching on YouTube, drop a comment there.
We have a stat guy.
We do. Yeah.
What's his name again?
Dennis.
Dennis,
I think.
Hey, Dennis, we need you to correct all our incorrect stats.
Yeah. So Dennis or anyone else out there, if you have more knowledge than we do, yeah,
Let us know.
let us know. We'd be more than happy to correct ourselves and acknowledge you as the one that has more knowledge than us.
Absolutely. All right, Ev, we've had a couple now. What did you think of the Firetrucker Brewery Tropical Burn Mango Double IPA?
I will say 8.5%.
I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it for sure. We've
Yeah.
had two.
I've had most of two, and I think that's all that I can do for tonight. We're gonna have to hang this up, and I'm gonna need to go to bed.
This is a nightcap. This is the one that you're finishing. You got the TV on, or you're staring at the fire, and you just need one more. And this is it. I like it. Though.
It's a good one.
It's
a good
delicious. I think for me, it's the caramel.
Yeah.
And I guess I can't figure out any better way to describe it, but it's that finish that kind of reminds me of a caramely finish.
It definitely surprised me. Like, I was expecting more of an amber, but I could sense the higher ABV too, and I'm surprised that I guessed so low. But I guess that's because we're typically more in the like 4.5 to 5.5 range, which is why I started like above 6. But yeah, 8.5. That's hefty.
Yeah. So I also knew. So Evan's a teacher, and this is the summer. And I knew Evan, of the two of us, Evan is the early one to go to bed. I knew the summer is the best time to have a beer that was higher than 8%.
I appreciate that. I really do.
Yeah. So I was thinking of you.
Thank you.
And I knew you'd
So
like it. So
considerate.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad I like it, because the description really, I was like, ooh, that's going to be good. And it was good.
Yeah, I agree. Very good. Very complex, might I add.
Yeah.
Like, it's not your typical like, oh yeah, that's a Bud Light or whatever. Like, it's just, you had me stumped from the beginning.
Yeah.
With everything. So
Well, it wasn't me. It was Firetrucker.
good stuff.
So.
It was good stuff. Good stuff from Firetrucker. Good on you for picking it, and great wrapping job too. Let's just admire that one more time if you're watching. What a solid tinfoil wrapping job we have here. So smooth, hardly any wrinkles. You got the tape.
Oh, stop!
You got the tape on the seat.
All right, man.
Next week we're gonna cover numbers 60 through 79.
Yeah, so let us know if you can think of the best to play for the Vikings, to wear anyone in those number ranges. Hopefully we'll be talking to Dustin Baker, so keep tuned in for that, and we'll kind of ask him. We won't go through every number with him, but we might ask him who he thinks the best Vikings are to play wearing that range of numbers. So it'll be interesting. He saw a different age of Vikings slightly. He's only a little bit older than us, but he definitely saw some more Vikings to wear those numbers than we did. So that'll be a lot of fun. So yeah.
There you go. All right,
man. Good
Best episode
good beer.
yet.
Best episode yet. Skol.
Hey Vikings fans, Evan here from the Skol Hop, and we just wanted to say thank you again so much for listening to the Skol Hop, and we also wanted to take one more opportunity to let you know that this episode of the Skol Hop has been brought to you by Big Top Ventures. If you're considering taking an all-inclusive trip to either Mexico or Jamaica, reach out to our friends at Big Top Ventures at bigtopventuresllc@gmail.com. Once again, that's bigtopventuresllc@gmail.com. You can get the lowest rate possible on several all-inclusive resorts throughout the region. Big Top Ventures. Step right up to your next big adventure. And thanks again for listening to the Skol Hop. Skol.